Hey, welcome back to the Barrel Proof Baseball Podcast. Today we have McCauley Williams and Kelly O'Shea from BR Distilling. So McCauley Williams is the president and CEO of BR Distilling. They make Bluenote Bourbon and Riverset Rye. They're out of Memphis, Tennessee. Kelly was instrumental in making sure that this conversation took place. She was nice enough to get me some of their bottles that they offer. Their first one is the Bluenote Juke Joint Whiskey. It's 93 proof. It's really good. Second is their 9-year-old bourbon. Right, this one's delicious as well. This is their straight bourbon, aged 9 years. We got the Riverset Rye, which is also 93 proof. I can't really see in the reflection. And then I saw on social media and had to make a comment about it. And Kelly was nice enough to make sure I got a bottle in my hands. This is their single barrel Riverset Rye. This is 119.9 proof. I had one drink out of this and thought I should probably not overindulge in this one because that's pretty delicious stuff there. So they're also coming out with a number of new offerings here in the near future. One of which is called the Crossroads, which is a French, I think he said a toasted French oak barrel. Oh yeah, I can't wait to try that one out. And that was not a plug for hoping they send one. I will definitely buy one because they've been more than generous with what they've sent me. So check them out. Check out their social media. They've done a really nice job with the Bluenote Bourbon on Instagram as well as the Riverset Rye. So check out their social media presence. It's really good. You've got links to their website from there where, depending on what state you're in, you can get bottles delivered to you. And their cost is really, really affordable. This is really good whiskey, and I think you'll really enjoy the prices that they are offered at as well. So for the money, I would highly recommend this. I've been sent a good amount of bottles since I started this podcast. I will definitely say that without a doubt, this is one that's on the list of companies who have sent me bottles that I will happily spend my own money on and buy at a later date. There's no doubt about it. I really enjoy this. I really enjoy their whiskey. And then also, I think after talking with McCauley and Kelly, you get a real idea or real sense of pride that they take in their company. And, especially from McCauley's perspective as being the CEO, the president of the company, he really is invested in making good whiskey and is determined to make Bluenote Bourbon and Riverset Rye a household name in the whiskey industry. And the path that they're on, I mean, I keep hearing people talk about this stuff in very high regard. So there's no reason to think that this is not going to blow up. I can only imagine that they're going to get bigger because everybody who tries it seems to really enjoy it. So I would try and get your hands on it sooner than later. I don't think you're going to regret that in the least bit. But what was cool about this conversation for me was, when I started this podcast and I wanted to talk with people who are in the whiskey industry, it was kind of for the exact reasons that you hear from McCauley and from Kelly about just the passion that it takes to be successful in this industry. For me, and not knowing much about it and trying to learn more and trying to talk to people in it and trying to taste different bourbons from different companies. And then hear stories and get to hear it from whether it's founders or distillers or people that work for each brand. You hear a different story and there's always similarities, but the passion behind why McCauley does this and how he goes about it is really, really impressive. And just his knowledge also. I mean, it's not to say that people aren't knowledgeable when they're in this industry. However, like his knowledge and the depth that he goes into with this, it shows why the popularity is starting to soar, because it's really good whiskey and you've got somebody behind it that is knowledgeable and passionate, and what more could you ask for? So check this episode out. I think you'll really enjoy it. Check out Riverset Rye and Bluenote Bourbon on Instagram. Check out their website and go buy yourself a bottle or 3. And I think you're really going to enjoy it. So check us out. Let me know what you think. Check the description box below if you want to support the Barrel Proof Baseball podcast channel. Different ways. You got Manscaped, you've got Walk-Offs and Whiskey, you've got Patreon, you got Amazon store, you've got my Venmo if you just want to send me money because you're feeling kind. You can do that if you'd like. My Venmo is not on there, but you can ask for it and I'll happily send it to you. That's all I got. Check this out, McCauley Williams and Kelly O'Shea from BR Distilling. All right. McCauley Williams, thanks so much for jumping on here. Kelly O'Shea, thank you as well for being on here and for setting this up today.
Thanks for having us.
No problem.
So tell me a little bit about, well, yourself and how you got into whiskey itself.
Yes, so this is McCauley Williams, President and CEO of BR Distilling in Memphis, Tennessee, proud producers of Bluenote Bourbon and Riverset Rye. Those are our brands. I am an attorney in Memphis. I like to call myself a recovering attorney because I got out of the full-time practice of law to get into the craft whiskey business, to the distilled spirits industry. I practiced mergers and acquisitions for a large law firm here in Memphis called Baker Donaldson, and we had a client of ours, really a client of mine, that had started a vodka distillery that wasn't really working out. Fell in love with the idea of craft spirits through working with that client, and actually a childhood friend of mine. And together we talked about pivoting the plan, the business plan that is, to whiskeys, and just thinking that whiskeys made more sense in Tennessee than did vodka. And of course, bourbon and whiskey, American whiskey, is seeing quite a resurgence in popularity, sort of the whiskey boom or the whiskey renaissance right now. So it just seemed to make sense. So over the course of about 12 to 18 months, put together a new business plan. And by that point, like towards the end of that time, like all I could think about was whiskey barrels and whiskey. And so I actually went to some of my clients, and we actually ended up buying the distillery out of liquidation. It's a little unusual. Normal, I was supposed to help liquidate the company, not necessarily buy it. And then I came on full time, and I just was so into it. But at that point, I was like, all right, talk to my new team that I'd put together and said, I'm ready to quit to run this thing full time. And that's what happened. It was sort of its own roundabout journey. It took about 2 years from start to finish to get in. And then we closed on the purchase of the distillery in August of 2017 and really haven't looked back. Just started, we bought the company because we wanted the license primarily. It can take up to 2 years from start to finish to get a distillery licensed. Distilleries are both federally and state licensed. And then there's all of the local city, county permits like use and occupancy, fire, et cetera, et cetera. Just a lot of red tape. And so by buying this company, we were able to step into their license and just kind of hit the ground running on our new business plan.
Were you always a whiskey fan, or was it just a better opportunity to be in whiskey versus like vodka?
You know, as my parents unfortunately can attest, I took to drinking at a pretty young age. So always liked, it happens, right? I always liked a good drink. And it was in law school that I really started to like whiskey. You know, in high school, it was like we were drinking whatever we could on the weekends after sports games or for the dance or whatever. And then in college, it was a bunch of cheap beer, light beer, and cheap whiskey and cheap vodka, and just kind of, again, whatever we could afford to have the best time. We even drank some of those alcoholic energy drinks in college. Those are the cheapest way to get a good buzz. Yeah. Spark. And there's one in Virginia where I went to school called Juice that was 13% alcohol, and it had like 3 Red Bulls in it worth of caffeine. So that thing would do you right back in the early 2000s. But
I was there.
Yeah, right.
I can feel my heart beating right now.
Oh God, yeah. There was that feeling like you would drink one and you like, yeah, your heart would start to palpitate. Your face would turn bright red. There's a reason why those things aren't on the shelf anymore. They're probably not healthy.
Yeah.
But in law school, you know, I start to calm down a little bit. And in law school, there's a whole lot of solitary studying, right? Like you have your big books and your outlines. You're just kind of in the library or at home studying a lot. And so I would look for, you know, like a nightcap or something to unwind after having like 10 cups of coffee throughout the day. And then kind of, you know, elevated my game a little bit and started trying various bourbons. And a buddy of mine actually turned me on. My first one that I recall was Bowman's, because it was a Virginia bourbon and I'd gone to college in Virginia. And then from there, that led to me just trying different things. And then I really grew a taste for a good bourbon. And when it came time to this business model, it was definitely born from the fact that I found whiskey, my partners found whiskey just inherently more interesting than vodka, but also just the sense of place makes a lot of sense. We're not in,
Sure.
um, name your other, not in Hawaii or Florida, right? Which you can make whiskey there and probably make great whiskey, but it just doesn't have that cachet or brand recognition. So just kind of the combination of interest and then just being in Tennessee kind of
Mm.
led us to the whiskey path.
My big curiosity whenever I hear of somebody doing something like that, it's always interesting because I think people are, always like inherently wanting to do something cool, like wanting to do something different or just something cool. Like, how do you go about making that leap? Like, how do you take the plunge and go, you know what, like I'm done being an attorney, like I'm going to jump in and go both feet into this whiskey business?
Yeah, so I love entrepreneurship in general and always knew I wanted to do something entrepreneurial and have formed a number of other side hustles or businesses along the way.
Mhm.
And there's kind of a general saying that, there's a lot of good ideas, but very few people willing to actually act upon them. So, a lot of people will be like, oh, I had that idea. And it's like, well, yeah, just because you thought of it in your shower or on a drive to work, that's sort of irrelevant if you're not willing to take the steps to make it actually happen. So I think
Mhm.
the first thing is actually just being committed to figuring out how in the hell to make it happen.
Yeah.
Um, and I have my personality is such when I get my wife can say it's to my detriment oftentimes. If when I get fixated on something, like I am like focused on that and we're gonna make it happen. And so my legal background certainly helped with some of the initial kind of red tape or just like the formation documents and kind of knowing the steps of what it takes to found a company, like just an entity, to get, we're a corporation now, started off as an LLC, but just the necessary steps of
Mm.
that. Um, but I think it's mostly just will and just actually being committed and taking down notes and going for it.
Now, okay, so what is that process like? So you've made your decision, you're going to do it, and you, like you said, you with your law background, like you're probably able to provide either help or insight or do it yourself that you may normally have to have somebody else do for you, or whatever that process is like. I'm sure it's a little tedious to continue going through that process, but
No doubt.
what's the process like now? You've decided to do it, and like you're getting it going. Like, what's that process like now?
Okay, so after you formed your entity, started your legal business, and raised capital, another big thing is actually getting the capital to fund said business operation. But let's just assume we've got all that in place. And your listeners can read about that online or listen to another podcast for that stuff. Then it comes down to like formulating your actual strategic plan and executing it. And for us in the aged spirits industry, the big barrier to entry is inventory, needing
Mm.
barrels of aged product that's ready to bottle. That's why so many craft distilleries start off in vodka or white rum or gin or any other unaged spirit. We had no desire to do a white spirit out of the gate. So working with other distilleries to curate and acquire inventory was step one. So that we had barrels to blend and bottle right out of the gate. It's extremely capital intensive to do that because aged whiskey is worth a lot of money. Whiskey actually is a unique commodity in that it appreciates in value as it ages. So the older the whiskey, the more expensive it is in bottle. Same within barrel form. And then getting in long-term supply contracts with other distilleries to get that inventory pipeline going.
Out of curiosity, real quick, what is that? What's a long-term contract like? I've never heard about that before. Like, what kind of length of time is that typically?
Yeah, so I mean, it can be a not long term. Just a supply contract could be a one single asset purchase of a single
Mhm.
lot of barrels, or it could be like in our case a 5 year term with options to extend. And
Okay.
so our long term contracts aren't to buy other people's barrels; it's to have other people produce our whiskey for us at scale. So we go to a large industrial distillery. We're a large distillery in industrial meaning just size, not necessarily referring to the lack of craftsmanship in the process. But we have worked with distilleries in Middle Tennessee and in Kentucky and bought up excess capacity on their still for them to make our recipes for us at scale to get the cost down. I mean, the distilleries that produce, whiskey at volume are hundred, if not multi-$100 million facilities. So this isn't just like your neighborhood craft distillery but bigger. I mean, this is like a whole campus of a facility that produces whiskey at the highest quality, at the highest volumes. And that's how we can get our cost of goods down, just get our whiskey costs down to make this whole dream economically viable.
So typically from the other side, it's like the sourcing side of, going out and getting whiskey. Like typically are people going out and picking out barrels that are already there, that are already being made, that matches something that they want, versus like what you're doing, having somebody else make what you want specifically?
Yeah, so there's two different. So sourcing is like a often confused term. So
Mm-hmm.
when I think of sourcing, I think of buying aged product like already on the market through a broker
Mm-hmm.
or through another distillery. Whereas what we're talking about is contract distillation. Some might
Mm-hmm.
call that sourcing, but it's really different in the fact that we are creating the mash bill, selecting the oak, and then selecting one of, if they have available yeast strains. Oftentimes, a facility will only have one or two available yeast strains due to yeast's ability to contaminate a facility. It's airborne. So you read a lot about people, quote, taking their own yeast strain up to MGP.
Mm-hmm.
They don't let you do that. You can't do that. That
It's a
would
fake thing.
contaminate the whole plant. That would
Sure.
contaminate the whole plant. But so that's really contract distilling, which is different than buying aged spirit from a distillery or a broker. So
Mm-hmm.
people might not realize there's a pretty robust trade of barrels behind the scenes amongst a lot of distilleries in the industry, amongst a lot of brands. A lot of brands don't have a physical location. They're just run from an office building, and everything is done from contract. And then there's also brokers. They're middlemen that specialize, guys and gals that specialize in buying from A and selling to B and taking a spread on it. And so that's really what I would call more sourcing, is buying from a broker or buying from an inventory lot that's placed on the bulk market. We have done some of that to get started, but now we're really focused on weighing down our new fill under our own contract distillation to get our volumes up so that we can increase our sales and so that we can one day build that $100 million facility of our own here in Memphis. We have a long-term vision of making Bluenote Bourbon and Riverset Rye two of the biggest whiskey brands in America.
I think it's interesting you say it, because I don't know that that's very commonly known. I think sourcing gets thrown in no matter what. It's like if you're not making it your place by yourself, that it's being sourced, versus like you said, they're making your whiskey. I mean, it's a different thing.
Yeah, they're just two fundamentally different things. I don't see anything wrong with either of them. But just to be clear, yeah, there is this it's really interesting because whiskey aficionados know so much about whiskey, the brands, the history, but there is this amazing lack of understanding of how it all actually works behind the
Sure.
scenes. And that's because most people don't discuss it. And there's a serious barrier to entry there just in terms of getting the information. It's very hush hush. And it's an opaque market, really, that's controlled by a handful of players. So it's
I think
just,
that's
I find it really fascinating.
I know. I was just say that's why I think this whole thing is super fascinating, because there is, like, I think you can find some information, and people are very quick to go, oh, it's MGP, or it's sourced by who, and like there is more to it, and there's stuff we don't even know that is going on, and it's like, okay, learn as much as you can, but then sit down and enjoy the whiskey. Like you don't need to dissect every ounce of this before you can just enjoy what you're drinking.
That's right. And think about it with wine. Oftentimes, the winery doesn't necessarily own the vineyard.
Mm,
I know it's a little different just due to the number of steps that would convert grapes into wine, but it's very analogous in our industry. So I think people are quick to write it off, but I think people are coming around as more and more brands are coming out there, and more people are putting out really quality stuff. I think it's easy to turn your nose up if it's not good, right?
sure. Now, what was the process like for you to, as you say, you went from drinking, Dave's whiskey out of a plastic bottle in college to starting to appreciate better whiskey, moving forward, and now getting to a point where you're educating yourself on both whiskey and the whiskey industry, and then also like from a business perspective too.
Well, that's what makes it so fun is you have like the arts and crafts side of it, of the
Mm,
flavors, the blending, the selecting inventory, and then the creating the design of your packaging and branding and all of that, which is really more of that kind of art side of your brain versus then, all right, like we have employees, payroll, health insurance, sales, negotiating that, logistics. It's really
Mhm.
more of like this, the pure business fundamentals. So it makes it fun because we're constantly combining both sides of our brain in that sense. Um, so for me, I started off probably like a lot of people drinking whiskey in cocktails and then going to drinking it on the rocks.
Mm.
And then now I pretty much only drink it neat. It's hotter than hell in Memphis in the summer. So sometimes in the dead of summer, I will drink it on the rocks. It's almost unbearable to
That's
drink
fair.
whiskey neat,
Sure.
especially like about like a wedding or some outdoor event. And if I can even remember what those events are like these days in
Yeah.
the pandemic times. And then just the fun thing about whiskey is I always equate it to folks that don't understand it is to wine. And we all know how much people can nerd out on wine and
Mm.
study the process, the flavors, and all of that. And whiskey's the same. It's
Yeah.
it's maybe slightly different in the sense that it's a spirit, et cetera, but it's the same in terms of the infinite amounts of complexity that there are in the spirit. And that's what makes it really fun to make it a career or a business out of it, is all of that complexity. Like you can't ever really learn everything there is to know about it because it's always changing. People are always innovating and coming out with new things. And to me, the most exciting thing on the actual product side is that innovation within the industry and how, we've all seen the flavor wheels of
Yeah.
where the flavors are supposed to come from, what you're tasting, you can market. And I see almost every quarter that flavor wheel growing, expanding. Like new
Mm.
flavors are being found in whiskeys as people are introducing new methodologies and techniques, whether it be through barrel finishing, toasted oak, or secondary oaking, or secondary aging. And then also just with varying yeast strains, more complex mash bills, different aging climates, you name it. And I think that's what's really exciting, is seeing more and more complex flavors come out of whiskey.
I think that is so much fun. Like when you talk to people that are, interested in it, or they're trying to get more into it and they're asking questions about it, and just the conversations that you get to have over a glass of whiskey about it. And like, nobody knows everything. And it's fun when you sit down and someone's like, oh, I get, creme brulee here. And somebody else goes, really, I get orange. And it's like, there's not really a right or wrong. And it's, it's for you to kind of enjoy. And I think that's so much fun. And I'm sure learning more just about the process of it makes it even better.
For sure. I kind of think of it too as whiskey is its own cocktail in a glass,
Mm.
even just neat. That's what makes it so fun for me personally. That's why I like it. And I think a lot of your listeners will agree. It's kind of, once you kind of get hooked on the taste of good whiskey,
Yep.
it's hard to go back. There really
Yep.
isn't going back. You can't ever really quite enjoy the everyday stuff you used to drink ever the same way. I mean, you can drink it. You don't have to be a snob, but especially if you're at like an event or traveling and they
Mm-hmm.
don't have anything, and you're just kind of like, I'm just left not kind of fully satisfied.
Yep. It's just having it to have it.
That's right.
So, okay. So now from like a brand perspective, why Memphis? Are you from Memphis? What's the connection to Memphis?
Yep, I'm born and raised in Memphis, Tennessee.
Mhm.
People from Memphis tend to have a chip on their shoulder a little bit, and there's a lot of city pride. Not saying it's the city with the most city pride in the country, but it's certainly up there.
Mhm.
And so we're in Tennessee again, just to reemphasize that point. So just making whiskey production here makes sense. We're on the banks of the mighty Mississippi River in the far southwest corner of Tennessee. And if you've read any of the history of the early whiskey trade, you'll notice that the river was how the barrels were transported. And so there is a cool historical element there too, of where all those barrels coming out of the Ohio River Valley would come through the port of Memphis on their way to New Orleans for East Coast distribution. So there's a great historical significance there. We today still are a logistics hub of the intersection of Interstate 40, America's longest
Mhm.
interstate, and then Interstate 55. So 40 goes from North Carolina to Los Angeles, 55 from Chicago down to New Orleans. And then we have a number of rail lines as well as FedEx being based here. So just from like a logistics standpoint of getting our product
Yeah.
out, it made sense. And then we have a tremendously advantageous climate here with our heat and humidity, a little bit warmer than Middle Tennessee, a little bit warmer than Kentucky. That
Hmm.
helps speed up the maturation process. And our humidity helps suppress loss to evaporation or angel share. And lastly, although I probably should have said this first, is our water. We have a killer water source. So we distill all of our product offsite with our partner distillers, but we bring it down to Memphis, all of our barrels down to Memphis to age because of our unique aging climate. And then we blend and bottle everything on site here at our distillery. So that's where we cut in our Memphis water to proof down our whiskey. And we have some of the purest water in the world, actually, through a multi-million-year-old aquifer system below the city. Memphis is unique in that we're one of the only cities in the world that derives its water from a self-contained artesian well system below the city that's naturally occurring. So that's a really fun fact, and it definitely plays into the smooth finish on our whiskey because this water has a really low mineral content by nature. So it makes it perfect for proofing down and blending whiskey. That's why there's also a lot of industrial breweries here, like White Claw. Is a lot of White Claws produced here in Memphis. Mike's Hard Lemonade, as well as Coors is a big Coors plant, and then recently they added a big High Noon plant here, and it all has to do with that water.
I didn't know that. I didn't know you guys had such a good water source there.
Yeah, it's kind of a little secret, really. But and then within the branding, so that's just kind of like why it made sense. From like these are all of the assets we have, kind of being here. And obviously we're looking for assets because this is our home and trying to justify it. But from a branding perspective, Bluenote's named after the Memphis Blues. Memphis is the city that is mentioned in more songs than any other city in the world. So not Nashville, Los Angeles, London, you name them. Memphis comes up in more music, and that's because of the blues, which the blues was the birth of American music. So the blues gave rise to jazz, it gave rise to rock and roll, and R&B, soul, modern day gospel, and even modern day country music is honestly rooted in a lot of blues riffs and notes. It's had a profound influence on just American music. And we thought that was a pretty cool history to play into with our branding because music and whiskey obviously just kind of go together. And then both of them have notes. Music has musical notes, and we have tasting notes in whiskey. And so a blue note in music is an actual music note that makes blues its own unique genre of music. And so we thought that was a really cool double entendre into tasting notes and musical notes, and just kind of
really cool,
trying to build a brand that has a meaning behind it.
Yeah, that's awesome. I've not spent much time in Memphis. I did have one evening on Beale Street, and I heard we had a really good time. It was it was a long time ago, but it was a good time for sure. So I can definitely see with the blues influence how that's a kind of a natural marriage there between the whiskey and the blues. That's really cool.
For sure. And we have a great culinary scene here rooted in barbecue. Which barbecue is kind of uniquely American. So bourbon's uniquely American, blues is uniquely American. So too is barbecue. So Memphis is we're known for our barbecue, and we also find that there's something that not only works with blues and bourbon, but also blues, bourbon, and barbecue. And you go to all these Instagram pages of the bourbon influencers, they're always grilling and smoking meats. Yep. Somehow, for some reason, it just works. I think all three of them, blues, bourbon, barbecue, have a commonality in the sense that there's relatively simple inputs put in and then remarkably complex outputs. So not a whole lot of crazy ingredients in bourbon or barbecue. And same too with blues music. It's the process and the way in which it's processed and manifested that makes it so complex on the back end. So I think that's something kind of cool about that.
So now getting into like the whiskey itself, when you are bringing barrels in, so that's good. And I was going to ask you about that. So you're blending everything's being stored in Memphis at your place. So when you're like, for example, the 9-year, now is that something that is, given the dates and everything, that's something that's aged there that you pick up that you're blending with like a new recipe of yours? Or how do you do that with like your aged process?
So the 9 years an outlier in our portfolio. So anything with that kind of age on it is something where we've worked to literally source that product. With folks, other distilleries that have really great excess inventory. We go through, curate out the barrels that we want, bring them down to Memphis, and then age them for a period of time prior to bottling. That can range from 6 months to a couple of years prior to blending and bottling. On our 9-year premium small batch, we actually blend 2 different mash bills together to create our product. So we do definitely make it our own through that process. But we figured we would much rather have in our portfolio some extra age stuff, even if it involves our sourcing it, as opposed to just trying to do our own laydowns through Riverset and Juke Joint. We thought the market was mature enough to understand, the sourcing aspect of it, and so far it's been a big success.
Yeah, it's really good. You'd hope they'd be mature enough to understand that by now. You'd hope.
Yes.
Now talk to me a little bit about for example, the Juke Joint. So everything's 93 proof, correct?
Yes, that's our house proof outside of our barrel proof stuff.
Okay. And then, so you're getting the barrels in, you're blending it there, and then is it a blend and then add water to proof it, or are you adding water, proofing it down, and then adding more whiskey? How does that process work?
Yeah, so that is literally called processing whiskey in terms of like the legal regulations. So you dump the whiskey out of the barrel. As we know, it's stored in the barrel at barrel proof or cask strength, a higher alcohol content than the average bottling. So we go through, select the barrels we like, we dump those into a dump trough, which then gets pumped over into our blending tank. That all gets churned and melded together to create consistency. We taste it again, etc. Get a final proof on what the net or the sum of all those barrels together proof out to be. And then we reduce it with water down to 93 proof when we're doing a batch. And that process can take about a week to do. Alcohol and water actually don't like to mix well together, especially with the fusel oils from the barrel. So one thing, we never chill filter our whiskeys. We feel like leaving in those fatty oils really help round out the mouthfeel and add a whole lot to the taste. And so when you combine water, alcohol, and oil, they don't like to mix. So it does take about a week for them to homogenize and come together, because you can have certain pockets within a big blending tank that are actually different proofs. You don't want that, obviously, because then you'd be bottling stuff that's not accurate. So make sure it's homogenized. And then what happens after the tank is we pull it out into smaller tanks that get taken over to our bottling line, and then we bottle it from there. Our batches are typically around 20 barrels per batch, so they are small batches. On Juke Joint, sometimes we flex up to around 30 barrels, but we try to keep it around 20. But on the 9-year, we keep it at 20, which when we say small batch, we mean it in that sense.
Yeah, an actual small batch, not the Heaven Hill small batch that's thousands upon thousands, you mean?
Exactly, yeah.
So I was looking online, and one of them, I think it was the Juke Joint, is Kentucky straight bourbon, and the 9 years to Tennessee straight. Is that right?
That's correct.
Do you do any charcoal filtering on the Tennessee or nothing?
So the Tennessee is Tennessee bourbon, meaning it has not gone through the Lincoln County process.
Okay.
Tennessee whiskey. And that's right out of the gate, kind of on the branding side. One, Memphis is very different than the rest of the state of Tennessee. We're in the Delta. Most of the Tennessee is in like the rolling hills. And just from like a cultural standpoint, we're sort of the black sheep of the state. We're the outliers. And with that, we wanted to do something different. We felt that Jack had really dominated the perception of what Tennessee whiskey was. So we wanted to do a bourbon, and Bluenote bourbon. The alliteration seemed to make sense. Right out of the gate, that was just a way to differentiate our product from other Tennessee products.
Sure, makes sense. Kelly, can I put you on the spot and hear about a little bit about what you're doing, since you got this all set up for us? So I'd love to hear about what you're doing and kind of what your role is.
Yeah, for sure. I'm a member of our marketing team here. So I'm really, this is kind of work, but it's so fun because the outreach side of it is great. Getting liquid to lips and brand exposure. It's super fun meeting new people that are huge supporters of our brand, become supporters of our brand, and your community has been, the most valuable thing to us. We don't do the huge marketing campaigns, the glossy, celebrity endorsed stuff, which is wonderful. There are some great products out there, but we're really proud of what we're putting out here. And so, we we want the community to speak for us. We're really proud of the juice, and I think it speaks for itself. So, I get to do everything in regards to marketing, from, input on product development to getting it, to the consumer. So it's a really fun role. I work a lot with the trade, like the distributors, the reps, that sort of thing. I originally started with the team on sales, and then in May, I believe, transitioned over to marketing, where my background is I come from a tech world. So this is super fun to me. Still doesn't feel like work. It's unreal, but it's every day is exciting. It's new. It's fun. We have some really neat projects in the works, some new products that I'm super excited about. So to be a part of all of that, it's awesome. Like I can't believe some days that it is work. So we're really enjoying it here.
That's great. I mean, it is definitely better when you're enjoying what you're doing. It makes your work day a lot easier to get through, more enjoyable for sure. I guess my question for both of you would be, how do you stick out in really a crowded space? I mean, there's so many good bourbons out there, and you guys are making a very, very good bourbon. From a marketing perspective, like you said, you're not getting celebrity endorsements, but how do you stick out in that way? And then how do you stick out just as a brand overall that's putting out very good whiskey?
I'll let Kelly go first.
Okay, I'll go first. Yeah. So authenticity is our big thing. And, it's just a given. Barbecue blues, bourbon, they go hand in hand. So that it's in itself makes a great marketing campaign for us. Mm-hmm. So it's literally connecting the dots, that sort of thing. The other thing, even though we are that craft size distillery in regards to size, no matter our growth, if we become a national brand, which our trajectory is going there, we will always stay a craft distillery in the sense of craftsmanship. We're really big on the quality that we're putting out in regards to the value. Before we started, we were talking about some of our price points. Yeah. And we're really proud that we have, sub $30, sub $50 bottles that we gladly put in those $40 to $80 categories, I think. That's my answer.
I totally agree with that.
I think that's a great answer. And in truth, that is the question, is how do you stand out? And I feel like so many craft distilleries get so hung up in the production process and their tasting room experience that they fail to realize sales and marketing is where the rubber meets the road. Really, everything else, as much as we and your listeners want it to matter, the process and the craftsmanship in the bottle, it doesn't. I mean, that's the sad reality of just the consumer marketing business, a consumer product marketing business. So we are a consumer product, and sales and marketing is where rubber meets the road. And like to Kelly's point, we're always trying to push the authenticity aspect. We believe in marketing the organic word of mouth way. We don't spend a ton of money on these huge advertising campaigns. We allocate a lot of resources to building out a sales team to make sure our product is predominantly featured in all the liquor stores that we want them to be, in bars and restaurants that we want them to be throughout our markets. But yeah, capturing market share in a competitive market is the question. We're still trying to figure it out. But ultimately that's it. We're not trying to, take over the whiskey industry. We're trying to capture a sliver of that pie at the end of the day. So it's a great question.
That's one thing I've noticed that from everybody I've talked to that's in the whiskey industry. It's like, no, everybody kind of has that same sentiment in some way or another. Like everybody's doing something. Nobody's trying to say like, we're going to take over. It's just you want everybody to do well because you want the industry as a whole to be as strong as it possibly can. And yes, you're going to be competing, but nobody is going out and buying one brand of bourbon only, and that's it for the rest of their life. They're going to try things, and you hope that, I would imagine you'd hope that they try it and they really like it and they go buy it again, or tell somebody else about it and go buy it again.
Well, I think that's right. And that's why I always compare our industry to wine. You think how many red wines there are. I love red wines. I think how many red wines are on the shelf at your grocery store, liquor store. Few people have just like the one brand that they drink only, right? And whiskey used to be that way, of where people like would only drink Jack or only drink Jim or Evan or whatever their brand was. But now our market has matured. And when I say mature, I don't mean like the people in it. I mean like the actual market distribution and saturation has matured to a level where people are collecting, trying new things. And so that is how we're able to get that's a huge advantage to us and other brands like us, is that the consumer is looking to try and experiment and, have a shelf like yours behind you that has multiple different brands on it. It'd be a lot harder if it was the old days where there's only like 5 brands and we're trying to butter our way in.
Yeah. Trying to compete with the big boys who are spilling more daily than most are producing.
No doubt. And let's not kid ourselves. They're still the big competitor. So people will often say, who's your number one competitor? And it's like, well, it's really not how this industry works. Of like, we might have brand adjacencies of brands that are of similar quality, packaging, et cetera, that we want to be near and around on the shelf. And those are just the other quality craft level products out there. But the real competitors are the big guys, the conglomerates. And so oftentimes you'll see kind of competitive craft brands squabbling in their sandbox when really they're missing the picture. It's kind of all of us versus them, the big guys.
That's awesome. I actually really like the way you put that. That's really cool. Take me through, if you would, kind of a little bit about each of these ones that I have, maybe some tasting notes or a little bit about it. I actually didn't know until Kelly told me earlier that the juke joint is retailing under $30, which is incredible to me. So A, how do you keep the price down like that? And B, tell me a little bit about the whiskey. I'm gonna pour myself some more.
So that I don't just completely commandeer the discussion, I'm going to let Kelly talk about the tasting notes. Kelly, if you're cool with that. But on kind of the marketing strategy and price point, that's a huge emphasis of ours, is we believe in fundamental economics of at the right price, a product will always clear the market, and that also consumers do shop price. And in a market where prices keep rising in whiskey, we feel that there is a backlash, that people are sick of the prices keep going up. And so we want to price our products for long-term success. And it's very difficult to compress our margin to do so. But that is sort of like at the very core of our marketing and sales strategy. But that's kind of the boring stuff. But Kelly, hit us with the tasting notes.
Yeah, so you're tasting our juke joint. That's the newest member of our family. We launched it in July, I believe. So obviously launching in unprecedented times was interesting, and it has quickly become our leading SKU, which is wonderful at that price point. It's intended to be the everyday drinker to our premium small batch at sub 50. That might not be an everyday drinker for everyone on the 9-year. So we were trying to kind of fill that void where we are that household everyday after work cocktail, which we came with a juke joint for that. So the juke joint is a Kentucky bourbon, as we talked about. It's aged in Kentucky for a year and a day. So it is considered Kentucky bourbon, meeting those requirements. And then it is shipped to Memphis at some point in there. After that 366-day residence in Kentucky, we then age it further, possibly blend and bottle it here in Memphis, and then distribute out of Memphis. So on our juke joint, we're very proud of this label. If you look at the actual label, you'll see the sheet music in the background, the lighter blue foil. That's actually a blues song. So somebody musically inclined, myself, not so much, could pick that up and play the song. We commissioned a local artist here to have an actual riff written on that. So it's super cool on that regard. Being it is a 3 to 4 year bourbon, it has a little bit more heat on it, I'd say. Hasn't had the extra time in the barrel to mellow like our 9-year, but it's still designed to be super smooth, super palate friendly. You do not get that insane burn or super ethyl that you can get from some of the younger bourbons. So I personally get a lot of citrus on it. I almost get like a persimmon apricot. I really like this. Every time when I was starting to drink this, it was kind of evolving depending on what I had to eat or drink that day. I noticed different tasting notes, but now it's at that price point, it's enjoyable, neat, but it's also wonderful in a cocktail. We do some really fun drinks with this particular one. It's very cocktail friendly, super palate friendly as well. And being that sub $30, it just makes sense for an everyday sipper.
And was it 21% rye? Is that what I wrote?
It's 70% 21 and 9. So 70% corn, 21% rye, and or I'm sorry, malted barley, and then 9% rye.
I feel like the
21 rye.
21 rye.
21 rye, 9% malted barley. Sorry.
I mean, with the price point as good as it is, and you know, you have a nice rye content. Like I feel like this would hold up really nicely in like an old fashioned. You know, it's not going to be too sweet. You know, I think some of those, just for me personally, like some of those really low rye ones, I just don't really enjoy in cocktails because like I still want to get a little bit of flavor out of it. So that's
For sure.
Yeah.
I like that.
This definitely has a very sweet note. It makes a really good old fashioned, makes a really good sour, whiskey sour. That tartness with it is really nice finish. We have a couple bars that sub another very large brand for this one and do a green tea shot. So it's super versatile, and at that price point, it makes sense for on-premise accounts as well. You know, it's a well in many bars and restaurants, so it's just a everyday sipper that we're super proud of.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that one. That was a really good one. And talk about the premium small batch, and this is the one that is a mix of 2 different mash bills, correct?
Correct. So this is our flagship SKU. This is what they went to market with. It is our little proprietary blend of 2 mash bills, an 84, 8, and 8, and then is it 70, 22, and 8?
That's correct.
Okay. Mash bill of those, super smooth. It is uncut, unfiltered, as all of our products are. As McCauley said earlier, no Lincoln County process here, no charcoal filtering. We like to leave the fatty oils from those barrels in. We think it really imparts a lot in the flavor. Also, the mouthfeel of it helps take that edge off really makes it a smooth product that you're getting. Get a lot of vanilla on this one, a little butterscotch caramel.
Butterscotch.
Definitely very smooth.
And yeah, I like this one. This was a good one. Now this is, so it's blended with 2 different ones. So the youngest is 9 years, right? Is there any, are most of them pretty much all 9 years that you're blending together, or is there some older ones as well?
9 and 10.
9 and 10.
With inventory, you know, there's birth dates that come up, so it's hard. Maintaining an age statement is very, very challenging for SKU due to those birth dates, and keeping, you know, you have to always have younger inventory and that will age up.
Makes sense. All right, now the rye. Let's talk about that Riverset Rye a little bit. I just got into rye not that long ago, so I'm kind of new to it, but I like it.
Cool. Very good. Well, welcome. We're glad to have you. So our Riverset was designed to sit on a shelf to complement our Bluenote juke joint, kind of a brother-sister combo, let's say. It is not your typical rye. If you are that super traditional rye drinker, you know, this might hit you a little bit different. Our rye drinks much more similar to a bourbon. Doesn't have too much of the herbaceous note. You get a little of that. I personally get a lot of apple on it, some fresh cinnamon, kind of the apple pie spices, as they call it. This is a 3 to 4 year product, again at 93 proof, unfiltered. And the Riverset, you know, this is kind of homage to our location here, residing, we're, I think, just under a mile and a half from the Mississippi is where our distillery sits. So as you can see, we're very proud of this label. It has the riverboat there. And as McCauley said earlier, you know, that's also reminiscent of the transport of the barrels along the Mississippi. So we have a great story here with this product. Again, not your typical rye, so it should be a lot more palate friendly, very smooth. Again, this one is a sub 30 as well, so 27 to 29.99, and very cocktail friendly or enjoyable on its own as well.
Yeah. I didn't know this was also sub 30. I guess you guys are onto something there. I like that.
Yeah.
And then
go ahead. Sorry. You had mentioned another one coming out, right?
Yeah, we have some new products coming out, but there's also a cask strength iteration of this Riverset that came to market a few months ago, and it's flies off the shelf. If you see that, it's got a black label with the gold, and those are Cast strength, they're single barrel offerings, and they're wonderful as well. It's just a kind of a higher octane version of the Riverset.
Yeah.
What does that
actually,
one
there's
come out
cask
at?
strength of all of those, all three of them.
Okay. What's the proof points on those ones?
115 to 127, depending on the expression, and then the barrel.
Okay. So we can keep an eye out. What is your distribution like? Where are you guys? How many markets have you guys been able to get into so far?
Check us out at bluenotebourbon.com and riversetrye.com, and you can go to the map feature and see.
Okay.
But presently we are in, I'm going to rattle them off here, see if I can do it. We are in Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, Florida, Georgia, Tennessee, Alabama, Mississippi, Arkansas, Kansas, Missouri, Colorado, and Texas. We have some fleeting distribution in Illinois that will be coming back online. And just this month, next week, we're opening up Oklahoma, and we are in the process of opening up Louisiana as well. So that'll be 15 states.
Wow. It seems like we in Arizona aren't as lucky as Colorado is. Those guys seem to always get everything up there, and we're like the last ones to get any distribution out here. So we got to get something changed. I don't know what we got to do.
Well, and Arizona is a great state, and one that we would probably be one of our next westward expansions. You know, California is the largest market in the U.S. I'm pretty sure for just about anything, just because of the population. And that's the same with bourbon, believe it or not. But aside from California, Arizona would be next. But part of the reason of that is I know Arizona gets a lot of tourism, but Colorado gets 85 million visitors a year. So their numbers are highly inflated upon the consumption because everyone's on vacation drinking.
Yeah, makes sense. It seems only smart to get some bottles in their hands. I get it.
And in the meantime, in Arizona, we do have online retailers that service Arizona through Curiata and Sealbox.
Okay.
So if you do get in a pinch, we do have ways that you can still get products.
Are there links? Are there links on the websites to be able to get to those? Yes. Okay, perfect.
Yep.
And where are you guys out on social media? Where can people find you?
At Bluenote Bourbon and at Riverset Rye. And we would love for you to check it out, follow. We're doing some fun things, kind of growing our pages, changing some things up. So.
Okay. Mostly Instagram?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Awesome. Any other things future wise that you would like to, let the cat out of the bag on?
So we're doing single barrels of our juke joint that have yet to hit the market. It's called Juke Joint Uncut, or the Bluenote Bourbon Uncut. And those barrels have actually survived a rickhouse collapse. So in order to be Kentucky bourbon, the bourbon has to age up there for a year and a day. And so we age our bourbon there for a year and a day prior to bringing it to Memphis. And then within one of our inventory lots, the rickhouse that we had it stored in collapsed, spilling 20,000 barrels out onto the ground and during a natural disaster. So fun story with those. Those are coming out at cask strength around 116, 117 proof, $39.99. We typically charge $10 extra for cask strength per bottle because we can't cut it down.
Mm-hmm.
We think that's a fair price increase. And then really exciting this summer, we're launching a whole new expression called Bluenote Crossroads. With Bluenote Crossroads, we've taken our high rye bourbon mash bill and finished it with toasted French oak. So it's a really cool package, no label. It's all silk screen printed directly on the glass. Wow. And it's sort of three-dimensional in the fact that like the back label faces inward and projects through the whiskey where it's magnified to go to the front. And then it's just a really cool packaging. So check us out on social for the release of that. And that toasted French oak adds a whole other element to the product. So there's a couple other exotic barrel finishes coming too. So just we're kind of always working on stuff.
I was gonna say, I think they sounds like the finishing thing right now is obviously pretty big. I mean, people seem to be into it and trying some pretty different things. So I was gonna ask about that if you guys were getting into the finishes because it seems like they're pretty popular.
No doubt.
Well, McCauley, Kelly, really appreciate your time today. Thanks so much for sending me these bottles. This whiskey is outstanding. I really enjoy it. I'll definitely be pushing it, and make sure to put some links in so people can get to your website and order some. So thank you very much.
Thanks for your support.
Absolutely. All right, guys, take
Thank you.
care.
See ya. Bye.